for our gathering really connects to not only the mission of our school, but the mission of K-State and our land-grant mission, and that we are dedicated to research that strengthens our communities, our state, and our world. So in this session, some members of our research team, just a few of us here today, are going to highlight some projects in our scholarly focus area and also share some pathways for partnering with the Staley School to impact your organization or community's challenges. So we'll share what we've done, and then if you're interested in partnering with us, we'll talk a little bit about how to do that. And so I'm gonna start by just sharing a little bit more about our research agenda and the leadership research program. So this, if you want to go a bit deeper, I'll just invite you to our website, because we actually have a whole area on our website around research. And so this is a new feature on our website we're really excited to share. So I don't know if like Brandon or someone else can like grab that website link and put it in the chat in case folks would like to go there later on. That would be great. But to help frame this, when we think about scholarship or research, I also want to express that scholarship comes in many, many forms, and we lean into Boyer's multiple definitions of scholarship, that research and scholarship can be about discovery, which is advancing knowledge, inquiry, and that should say investigation, not instigation. Scholarship of integration, making connections across disciplines, emphasizing context and illuminating data in new ways. Scholarship of application, so how the illuminating the ways that we can apply outcomes of discovery and integration that moves towards engagement. Scholarship of engagement, connecting our institutions and the work happening at our academic institutions to the pressing social, civic, and ethical problems that are present in communities. And the scholarship of teaching, so building bridges between understanding and learning, and the innovative ways that we are engaging in our classrooms and developing practices for leadership learning and development in our case. So at the school, we've established 3 focus areas that really guide our trajectory of research and scholarship. Our overarching goal is really about improving the quality of life for all. Leadership for the common good is another way we say that. The 3 areas or focus areas are advancing leadership learning and development, building civic capacity, and leading change. And I'll share just a quick insight about each of those. So when we talk about advancing leadership learning and development, what we mean is exploring how to create powerful experiences to learn and develop leadership. So we study this in our classrooms, as well as through our partnerships with nonprofits, businesses, and communities. So when we talk about leadership learning and development, we don't just mean what's happening here in this building. We mean in all the ways that leadership formation and development are happening. And then we also support leadership educators and developers here in our school and beyond, in our field, in our communities, through sharing the practices that we learn, practices that are relevant to today's world. Some specific things that we are advancing are ideas around coaching, high impact practices for leadership learning, and then leadership educator professional development. Just a few ways that we're doing that. When we speak about building civic capacity, we have an interest in strengthening the public good through our research. So working to understand how to build communities and organizations that are resilient. We study how groups, organizations, and systems think about leadership, and we're very interested in how do we mobilize people to do this important work. And so, again, some of the ways that we're doing that is through projects that build stronger and more effective leadership, through deliberative civic engagement, exploring civic leadership and trying to understand some of those practices and processes, and then also through dialogic process consulting and leadership coaching. And then this also connects really specifically to some of the things Brandon will share around our partnerships and the ways that we can support organizations. And then our last bucket, which certainly all of them are integrated, not rather than separate, is leading change. So We believe that research can offer a pathway to understand and innovate new ways to tackle the complex challenges that we're facing as a global community. And so we're trying to help individuals and communities imagine new ways to lead change, new mindsets, new strategies. And we do this through partnerships and helping organizations and communities to navigate change to create that better world. So through our engaged scholarship approaches, this is how we do that. So again, that's a lot. You can read a lot more about that, but just this is the focus of many of our projects and the scholarship that we're doing. And on this slide with a lot of words, I listed just some of the studies, projects, and publications that are currently being engaged at the Staley School. So you can see that we've got a real diversity of ideas, and we're reaching a lot of different sectors and places through, again, this is just some. I couldn't even fit all of the list on this page. So that's really exciting for us when we think about the impact that we're trying to make through our scholarship. So in this showcase, we're going to share a few different projects that we're working on, and again, partner opportunities. So first, Tess Hobson is going to share a bit about the work that she and Mac Benavides have been doing around intercultural simulation as case in point leadership learning. Tomasz is going to share a bit about third floor research and the learnings that that they've had and how they're turning that into products. I'll share a bit about a book project that I've been working on that involves many others in the school. And Brandon will, again, wrap us up with some partnership opportunities. So with that, I'm going to stop my share, turn it over to Tess, and let her begin.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Can everyone see my screen? Good. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Tess Hobson. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a graduate teaching assistant with the Staley School and have been since fall of 2019. And the class that I've really spent a lot of time working in is Lead 350, Culture and Context and Leadership. So I'm going to talk a little bit about an innovative practice that we've implemented into that class, specifically an intercultural simulation, and how case in point leadership learning really informs and sort of grounds what we do through that simulation. So this is work that I've worked on with Mac as well as Alaya, who are able to be here. So just a quick background on case in point. Case in point is a learning strategy where we create the conditions for students to learn a practice reflectively by doing that practice in real time. So we specifically utilized the adapted 5-step case in point framework to apply to our simulation. So you can see the 5 steps on the screen. I'm not going to go through them right now because I'm going to go through them more as they apply to the intercultural simulation that we do. So just to set a little bit of context, this is a simulation we do in Lead 350. So Lead 350 is a class that explores how students' cultural identity, their lived experiences, and their socialization affect how they practice leadership and how they understand the concept of leadership. So the intercultural simulation that we do in this class is called BAFA BAFA. It's something that allows the students to experience the prevalence of socialization and ethnocentricity in real time. So through the simulation, students are able to experience and unpack several things, both cultural belonging and othering, how to negotiate differences in cultural values. They experience culture shock, and then they also experience instances of cross-cultural conflict. So that'll make a little bit more sense here when we get into how the simulation works. Okay, so the first step of case in point is to identify learning outcomes. So this is sort of like the prep work to set students up for the simulation. We implement the simulation at a very specific and strategic time in the course of the class. So before we do that, we have sort of dived into these different outcomes already. So students have begun to explore systemic injustices and how they've been socialized into what they consider to be normal. We've really helped them understand concepts of intercultural humility and empathy. We've interrogated the stories that we hear and that we tell that can serve to challenge or perpetuate oppressive systems. And then Bafa comes in to allow them an opportunity to experience these things in real time and be able to unpack them. So step 2 of the CIP model is to create that common experience for students to unpack. So this is the common experience is the cultural simulation called Bafa. So I'm going to give you just kind of a brief overview of how this works. In a class of about 40 students, the students are divided into 2 cultures. So there's about 20 students in each culture, and they go to separate classrooms. So in one classroom, we have the alpha culture with an instructor who teaches the students about their cultural norms, their cultural rules, and expectations. So the alpha culture is very high context. They're a collectivist culture. They have a really strong emphasis on group harmony, on social hierarchies, and they play a game in their culture that really emphasizes the importance of social interaction, not so much competition or winning the game that they're playing. And then the other culture, which is called the beta culture, students are given a set of rules and expectations and norms that make them a very low context culture. They're very individualistic, they're capitalist, they're only focused on accumulating wealth. And so they also play a game, but that game is played with one rule and one rule only, which is to be very competitive and to do whatever it takes to win the game and gain wealth. So in their culture, a person's value is measured by how much wealth they have. So we spend about 15 or 20 minutes just teaching the students their cultural norms and expectations, and allow them to practice and to interact using these norms and rules, and really start to embody what it means to be a part of the alpha or beta culture. And then after that, we have about 4 or 5 rounds of groups of students who travel from their culture to the other culture. And what they do is they enter that classroom and they observe and they try to interact with the other culture. And then they'll come back after a couple of minutes and report to their home culture what happened, what they learned, give advice for the next group who's going to go over. And we continue to do that until all students have had an opportunity to travel to the other culture and try to interact. So as you can imagine, some really interesting things happen. Sometimes when students go to the other culture, they tend to stick together. They don't really try to interact. They just continue to use their own cultural rules and norms, just in a different space. And it's also really interesting to see how the home culture invites in and accepts or doesn't accept the people coming in from the other culture. Sometimes they do try to teach them their values and how to interact, but more often than not, they alienate them. They exclude them, they sometimes even banish them or kick them out of their culture for not being able to follow the rules and norms correctly. So that's a common experience that students then are able to unpack. So for steps 3 through 5 of the CIP model, this all happens in the debrief of the simulation. So step 3 is to create conditions for students to identify teachable moments. We do this by spending a significant amount of time on the critical moment, is what we call it, and asking students to reflect on that. So that moment right before they were about to travel to the other culture, they knew they were about to leave a place of familiarity and go into the unknown. What feelings came up for them? What questions did they ask themselves? What were they thinking in terms of how they were going to try to navigate their own cultural values? Going into a culture whose values would likely be different, and then what in the end they decided to do with that. So these are all things that they think about that they've reported really help them build empathy for people who in their everyday lives may experience this feeling of being a cultural outsider. And then step 4 is to facilitate reflection and action around those teachable moments. So what we do next is ask students to think about the behaviors they exhibited that maybe hindered inclusive leadership, and how they could have behaved differently with more inclusive behaviors. So students think about how, a cultural outsider comes into their culture, and in one culture they speak English and in the other culture they don't. And so some students are very quick to be like, oh, you don't speak English, you need to leave. And so thinking about ways they could have tried to navigate their own cultural values while still including others in their culture. And then also thinking about just how quickly they engaged in polarizing behaviors. So many students will make comments like, their culture was so weird. Like, why would they do those things? It didn't make sense. They were so rude. They weren't welcoming. Our culture was so much more welcoming. And they start to think about how polarizing that behavior is, and recognizing that the cultures just had a different set of rules and expectations and norms that they were socialized into, and that neither were right or wrong. They were just very different. And then finally, step 5 is debriefing for deeper understanding. So the last step of the debrief is we ask students to apply their learning to their everyday life. Think about what it was really like to feel like they didn't belong, and think about the communities they're a part of, the groups they're a part of, in which there might be people who are experiencing that same feeling, and what they could do to try to make that a more inclusive space. What would leadership look like to create communities where everyone felt that sense of belonging? So just a couple quick outcomes that we've noticed from this innovative practice. First, many students report that this was their first time in their lives feeling like a cultural outsider. So just having the opportunity to experience that was really powerful for them. Likewise, a lot of students say they've never really understood how it felt to not belong, and that this activity helped to increase their empathy and open their eyes and their hearts to the importance of promoting inclusion so that people don't have to feel that way. They also make really powerful connections between their own practice of leadership by really thinking about their involvements in their communities, and what are some tangible action steps they could take to create those spaces that are more inclusive. A lot of students say this is the most impactful thing they do in Lead 350, and that's really a turning point in the class, being able to actually experience these concepts that we're talking about in real time, rather than just thinking about them conceptually. And then finally, students just express that the activity helps them to, or sort of motivated them to have a deeper commitment to creating a more just and equitable world, which is really the goal of the class. So that's something that we like to hear and we like to see. So that's just one example of when we think about leadership learning and development, how we have used theory to practice through case in point to really develop a powerful learning experience for students in 350.
Thank you, Tess. If folks have questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat to hold them. We're going to take questions at the end. But I'm going to invite, actually, we're switching up the order slightly from how we had planned it. But Tomasz, would you be able to open up and share your screen and go next? Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Can everyone see the slides? Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Tomasz. Originally, I'm from Hungary. I'm currently doing my PhD with the Staley School of Leadership Studies. I'm also a graduate research assistant, and I'm working with the Kansas Leadership Center. It is a privilege for me to share some insights. I will be very brief so that we have time for questions and for a conversation. So what is Third Floor Research? It is a research initiative, collaborative effort between the Staley School of Leadership Studies and the Kansas Leadership Center. And the way Third Floor Research was set up was associated with the acknowledgement that the problems, I mean, the way we solved problems in the past is no longer valid. I mean, we can depend on the authority or experts to solve problems, or many cases this is not the case. Even I would avoid the word solution, because many times what we need is just progress on adaptive challenges. So the Third Floor Research consists of lead researchers, research assistants, research project managers, and it is international because lots of countries are represented. I mean, I'm representing Hungary, but there are people from Chile, from Iran, and other regions, even within the states, many states. The output of Third Floor Research can be captured on three levels. Number one, the leadership learnings, which the goal here is to advance leadership teaching and learning. The research projects, which I will just outline in a second, and the global database, which is a new initiative. The goal is to collect data across the globe, regarding leadership development programs and the impact of leadership development programs. So as for research projects, when I came to Kansas and I joined the Kansas Leadership Center research and the Staley School research projects, there were 4 classical applied research projects, ongoing projects. So the first was the robust leadership capacity of Latinos in Kansas. Here the goal was to learn more about the perspectives of Latinos and the Latino communities in Kansas regarding leadership. The second was the high-tech research. There was a global multicultural organization which had sites even in other countries. And this organization was saturated with leadership development programs, and we were curious to learn more about the changes happening on the individual level and the organization level. The third was the nonprofit research project, which captures the change after the leadership development programs regarding leadership behaviors, efficacy, mindset, workplace engagement, obviously in the nonprofit context. And last but not least, the community engagement research project, which was associated with leadership and civic outcomes of community leadership programs. I would focus on one which I was engaged in, the high-tech research. So as I mentioned earlier, there's this big company with multiple sites facing lots of challenges in terms of communication across, people working in silos, how to break those trends. And the company was saturated with leadership development training by the Kansas Leadership Center. So our curiosity was to see what happens if an organization like that is saturated with leadership development trainings. And the findings were striking. They emerge on 2 levels, the employee development and the organizational changes. So talking about the first, people's perception on leadership and the thinking about leadership changed. So they replaced which actually I had before I started my leadership journey, the mindset that leadership is, somebody on the top of the organization or a couple of people provide direction, protection, and order. So the employees started to view leadership as an activity that anyone can exercise in the company. With that, obviously, the attitude and the behavior started to shift. So people had more confidence to exercise leadership, including approaching and solving problems in an adaptive way, asking the right questions, many times raising difficult questions, being proactive, initiating change, and running experiments, so breaking with the status quo. In terms of the organizational changes, employees start to think and do their work differently. They had this shared language which helped them go through overcome the conflicts, and more collaboration happened. Employees were more prepared to try new things. They paid attention to adaptive challenges, and the whole organizational culture changed. So with people with these adaptive mindsets started to engage more in the diagnosis within the company, separating technical problems for adaptive problems. Employees started to listen more and collaborate across units. I think that when I was preparing this presentation, I thought that you would be interested in the domestic process of how we shift the research findings into products. So after we published, KSE published the research findings of three of the research projects, there was a need to create products which can be used for marketing purpose, but can be disseminated, especially after defining target audiences. So once we have the research findings, we are looking for important issues or themes. Many times this becomes obvious after doing the analysis, after the coding procedure. So once we have the emerging issue, we write a script or a description of the problem, including the problem, the gap itself, the target group for whom it can be interesting finding, and then we elaborate on in the material we elaborate on the findings with some examples, concrete references, and then the next stage is basically we communicate with pass on this information to the Kansas Leadership Center communication team, and they work on the visualization. Like many times it is a digital animation. If you go to the website, KSE website, you will find examples for that. And these are the illustrations of that given issue or theme. And it is very important that after the product is developed, it can be used in many ways, by the way. But for instance, if it is integrated into the training, the leadership training, the trainers find examples, good examples for that product, and so that the audience can link to that product to concrete real life examples, cases, or stories. And it is also important to mobilize the audience to think of their own examples, past experiences, and they can directly relate to that product. So this is, in a nutshell, the domestic process, how we shift, research findings, how we use research findings to create, to come up with products. Basically, that was my presentation in a nutshell. Please feel free to reach out to our research team, and thanks for your attention. Look forward to hearing the questions.
Thank you. And we can make sure to get all of those links shared with you in the chat as well before the end of this session. So next, I'm going to share a little bit. Can everyone see that? There's like a bright screen. Okay, wonderful. I want to share with you about a piece of collective scholarship that really emerged from the pandemic and really the confluence of pandemics that we've experienced over the past couple of years. And this particular project was the focus of my sabbatical work, which was last spring. But really, again, a collective effort, including the work of many of our graduate students and faculty and community partners here at K-State. And so I shared this image because this is actually the cover image. We're not quite at the stage yet where we have full cover art, but this is the image we selected. And it was really intentional because when we thought about, right, how the confluence of complexities that we've been experiencing, particularly as for folks working in higher education, that's the focus of this book, but really for all of us, it can feel like really heavy, dense clouds. And I don't know about you, but for me, you know, when those clouds settle in, and not just our health concerns, but political polarization, economic insecurity, racial tension, inequity, injustice, when all of those settle in, it can feel really scary, right? It can be hard to see a way forward. And to think about how do we do our work well in these times, and what is our work for? How do we respond to these times? And so this image represents the intent of this book, right? That if we really stop to notice the clouds around us, we can begin to see patterns within them, right? It's not just one big dark cloud. And as we work to navigate and make meaning, we can find those breakthroughs of insight that can illuminate a path forward. And so that was the process of this book, was very much that, and we hope and we invite others into that process as they engage with the book as well, which should be out next year. So let me tell you a little bit more again about the purpose and the process, and then what the book is about. So again, this emerged in response to the complexities that we've been experiencing. We hope it will be a guide for those seeking to learn through critical perspectives, who are seeking more agile, responsive tools for navigating complexity and disruption. And the audience in particular are new and entry-level leadership educators, as well as senior scholars in higher education. So all of our authors have a higher education lens, but certainly the application extends far beyond higher education. The process, it really was an emergent process. It came out of relationships and conversations, and formed as a collaboration between the Staley School and our Leadership Communication Doctoral Program and Florida State University's Leadership Learning Research Center. And my co-editor, Kathy Guthrie, edits the series on contemporary perspectives on leadership learning, and invited us into this collaboration. And so my role and the work of our authors was really from about fall of last year to June of this year. So it's a pretty short timeline actually for putting together a book of this scope. We ended up with 23 chapters by 35 authors, 6 of which were by 14 K-State authors, graduate students, faculty, and partners. And we hope to have the publication in early 2022. So the resource, it frames leadership learning and development as a process of adaptive action in complex systems. So we really leaned into theories of complexity and adaptive work as a guiding framework and a lens for how do we navigate the challenges that we're in. And so we invited authors to use these questions of what are you experiencing in your work? So what does it mean? What insights are coming up for you? What learning is happening as you engage with complexities in your workplace? And then now what questions should we be asking in the future? What direction should we be taking as we continue to transition through? And so really what emerged from folks writing about this was some really cool patterns that guided then the organization of the book. So I'm going to share with you the themes that came out from the chapters, just a little bit about each one, and then highlight who our chapter authors were. I hope I got all of them in my notes here. So the first theme that came out in terms of how the chapters grouped together was about expanding dynamic leadership frames. So this particular section raises consciousness about how paradigms and perspectives influence leadership, research, education, and practice. We know there's lots of ways to think about leadership, and all of our authors in this section, including Dr. Cleaver, helped us to contribute to just expanding the way that we think about leadership and what that implications are for navigating complexity. The second theme that emerged were around leadership practices in higher education. So if we think about how the leadership education within higher education is kind of a container, right, for holding the work. The pattern that holds these chapters together is a shared vision, a belief that higher education can develop leadership capacity to realize social change. And so these authors highlighted pedagogies and tools and strategies to facilitate engagement from individuals to institutions, so kind of across scale. The third theme that emerged in the book was about higher education as a stakeholder in leadership activity. And so this shifts the lens of the discussion from higher education as the site of leadership practice to higher education as a stakeholder and a partner in leadership activity that addresses broader societal challenges. So community engagement includes lots of forms of collaboration between higher ed institutions and larger communities. And so these chapters focused on this particular lens. You can see a few more of our K-State authors contributing there. Our third theme revolved around identities in terms of identity, understanding how identity is critical to personal and system level understandings of leadership processes. And when we think about adaptive action, it's essential to ask both, what are the differences and what are the differences that make a difference in a system? And in this system of the book, our authors identified aspects of identity important within our current complexity, particularly around race and gender. So that's what these chapters are related to. And you can see Tess is also co-author of one of these chapters. And then our final theme was around global context. So the last group of chapters highlighted what we call like the fractal nature of complex adaptive systems, that there are infinitely complex patterns across different scales and different points of view. So the pattern of global context could refer to planet-wide challenges, or it can also refer to how challenges manifest in local issues in organizations, institutions, and communities across the world. And so in some ways, really all of the themes prior to this reflect global context as well. But in this particular case, there's a specific focus on global or international perspectives. And so again, the resource itself shares all of these chapters, but what we really want to do is invite readers to join and engage through an inquiry stance. And so we've included lots of questions and considerations to allow folks to reflect on their own roles and contexts as they navigate complexity themselves. So with that, I'm going to pass it over actually to Brandon to kind of bring together opportunities moving ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Priest, for that wonderful presentation. And thank you to all our presenters for sharing about the important work going on at the Staley School of Leadership Studies. As a land-grant institution, it's important that our teaching and learning practice goes beyond the walls of the Leadership Studies building and influences the larger field, our communities that we're situated in, and the globe at the largest levels. But yeah, thanks, Carrie, Dr. Priest, for this opportunity to speak on some of the strategic initiatives and partnerships work that we're doing at the Staley School. So far, these have reflected both nonprofit, for-profit, and government agencies. We've partnered with these organizations to do both leadership, learning, and development efforts, but typically those efforts are connected to some scholarly efforts. So we work with our faculty and graduate students to put on these initiatives. So typically, when we think about strategic partnerships and initiatives at the Staley School, they've been organized within 3 areas. And so these 3 areas are where partners have typically asked us to engage. So one of them is leading change. The second block is learning and development. And the third is reports. So when we think about that leading change category, what organizations and community partners have asked us to do have been typically what some call organization development or dialogic organization development. We've also included some action learning where we've worked with organizations to design an experience where they can in real time make sense of their organizational and leadership challenges. So this might look like group coaching or leadership coaching or in real-time process consulting. So in that second category, when we talk about learning and development, that really ranges the gambit to experiences where we work with folks to develop new skills, mindsets, practices, and capacities. One project that we've recently completed with a for-profit company in the region is doing some process consulting that included leadership for organizational adaptability training. So we introduced some concepts to that leadership team and work with them to think about how they can exercise leadership that helps their organization be more adaptable. We've also worked with community groups on leadership identity development, where we designed a curriculum so that participants in a coalition of community members could see themselves differently in leadership work. But again, that kind of those typify the types of leadership learning experiences that we advance. And then third, we've been asked to help groups create reports, right? And so I know Tomasz talked a little bit about some of the reports that are highlighted through the Kansas Leadership Center, but we've also been invited to community groups and nonprofits that are doing maybe strategic planning, or they've engaged stakeholders through deliberative civic engagement forums, and they'd like some way to easily report out the results from those participatory processes. So we work with them to write reports and conduct some types of analysis on those participatory processes so that external groups can make sense of the work that had taken place. So those might look like strategic planning reports, or they might be reports that summarize the results of the deliberative civic engagement experience. So these are really the ways that we have engaged partners in the past. Partners have approached us and we have approached partners. So if you're interested in partnering with us or know someone or maybe an organization that's interested in working with us, please have them reach out. Oh, excuse me, I just muted myself. I was trying to change the slide to the last slide where it had my email address, but maybe I missed that. I might not have.
Brandon, I just put it in the chat too for folks.
Okay, perfect. So,
and we'll come back to that at the end. I just wanted to open it up for folks so we can chat just a bit.
Perfect. Thank you. And so
Yep.
just if you have any interest in learning more, shoot me an email. We're always looking for new partners and excited to talk more. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Brandon. So with that, I would invite folks, you can open up your cameras. You can raise your hand if you'd like, or just open up your mic if you have any questions or maybe feedback or just insights that are coming up for you as you have heard now 3 examples of research and a bit more about our agenda and opportunities. What's on folks' minds?
Hey, Carrie.
Yeah.
Hey, so thoroughly impressed with what you guys have been doing and definitely miss being a part of it. But so a question I would have is, of everything that you guys are doing, which project, in your, a little bit biased, like which baby do you like best, but which project do you believe has made the greatest impact, or which graduate student's project has made the greatest impact, or faculty?
That's a hard question, Irma. And I think in some ways it's hard because the work is so emergent that, impact feels like long-term. And so I think all of the projects, again, this is probably my collectiveness bias, right? Especially when I think about if we are working from a framework of of complexity and collective leadership, right? That's our values. Actually, no one project has the most impact, right? Like it's like the collection or the network of activity that is making a difference. So while I hear your question, and I guess that's another way of saying, I don't know, I'm not sure yet, but I do think each project has importance and impact in its own way, and it's that network of work that is important to us.
Sure.
Others have interpretations.
I know that was a setup question, but I mean, you know, like when I think about leadership studies, of course, I think about food insecurity and the tremendous impact that the students have had over the years. So then when I think about the graduate program and what the purpose was, and as you know, as the program was growing, I've got to think that, and you're right, eventually there's probably going to be some that are going to be, you know, more of an impact than some of the others. So you're good. You're good.
Yeah. And I think you're highlighting too, Irma, that we've been doing this work for a long time, right? And it's like, but what we're doing now is we're putting a name around it. We're putting some intention and focus around that to be able to have a greater impact and communicate the value of that even further.
For sure. Yeah. I'm happy for you guys and proud of you.
I'd like to just add that the impact is felt in lots of different spaces, which is part of the web and the network that Carrie was talking about. But the work that Tess and Mac and Alaya have done, that we're feeling that immediately in the application in our classroom. So that's kind of like here and now, right to the heart of activity here in this building. The work from third floor research and the partnership work that Brandon is talking about, we're seeing it in the communities across the state of Kansas and beyond. We have, so it's that is both it's a great problem to have. It's a little harder to measure impact when you are in lots of different spaces, but that's part of the real, I don't know, power of this work as well.
Others, reflections, or presenters, you can reflect too if there's something, an insight that you have. Brandon?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Priest. So I think one of the things that I really appreciated about today's presentation and hearing from our panelists was just the range in which scholarship is taking place. And so I think one of the aspirational goals that we've been talking about for many years, at least the time that I've been here, is trying to understand leadership studies as a interdisciplinary and broad field that requires a range of ways of knowing and engaging. And I think it's exciting to see the scholarship that was listed on that slide and what was presented today as really contributing to all of those different areas. And so I think it's something exciting and something hopefully that we can maintain that energy moving forward. So I wanted to elevate that.
Hey, Tess. So in regard to, so are you guys doing BAFA in the classes, or is it something like you're doing as a study?
It's a classroom activity. So it's what Mac and I have done in the sections of Lead 350 that we've taught ever since fall of 2019.
So you now do it in 350 every semester? I mean, every class, every semester, or just you do? Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'm familiar with that activity. So it was neat to hear you talk about it.
Yeah. It's definitely been something that students consistently use in their like reflection papers, and even in like teaching evaluations, it comes up as something that just really impacted them in the way that they see the world. So,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely a good activity. Yeah.
Tomash and Tess, I wonder if you would be interested in speaking to how has your experience as teaching assistants and engaged in scholarship through your doctoral program, how has that helped to shape the way you're thinking about your future work?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, I didn't know much about research, regarding leadership. I was after I started my journey at the Kennedy School. I was teaching. I was facilitating leadership training in Hungary, and in a given cultural context. So I believe that having the chance of and the opportunity to go through a second journey where I learn more about research and in a different cultural context, obviously, and also seeing the research projects at KSC being very purposeful. I'm coming from a country where research is just for its own sake. There is no need to define products, or it is not so practical. That is also contributing to my shifting. It is, for me, it is a sort of transformative process, and I really appreciate the whole program sort of helping us get there, because when I started, I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't know the exact steps, and it was hard for me to imagine that at the point I will be there and I will defend my dissertation. But it is a brilliant program, I would say.
Yeah, I guess I would just add that it's really changed my conception of what what research is, and sort of piqued my interest in being involved with that side of academia, and also the excitement that comes with the collaboration of research, I think, is something that's maybe unique to the school, and just being able to bounce ideas off of each other and develop things together in community is just more fun, and exciting to bring all those different ideas together. And it's definitely given me a lot more confidence in my abilities as a scholar moving forward, and really appreciate all of the mentorship that I've received from faculty in the Staley School.
Thank you. We have just a couple more minutes if anyone else would like to share or has a question. Thanks, Kylie, for your message. This did put the baby to sleep, which seems right. And thank you. We're inspired by you and the work that our current and past students have done and are doing. And you're the reason why we keep pushing forward.
Hey, Brandon, can you make a few more comments about partnerships?
Yeah.
In regard to like some maybe specific examples of current partnerships?
Yeah, so one partnership that we just finished, I by the agreement we have with our sponsored project, I can't name the specific business, but it was a international media marketing firm, and we worked with them for 9 months. We had a plan set out, but it actually overlapped during the COVID time. So our plan had to be readjusted, and we did a lot of the work over Zoom, which ended up working out really well because then it was a lot easier to record our sessions for data collection because we were on Zoom. So that went well. We've also done some strategic planning for nonprofit organizations. So Dr. Priest and I had done that work with Cons United Way a few years back. We've had a lead comm student work with Save Farms just this past year, and that work has resulted into a dissertation. So Susan Metzger is actually going to be defending her research on that partnership this upcoming Wednesday as part of her dissertation defense. We've also done some work with the Kansas Leadership Center around the leadership and public service work that they're trying to develop, and some of their what they're calling facilitator training that's tied to like the Kansas Beats the Virus effort. So we're always looking for new partners, and we're always excited to collaborate and find ways to make something work. But typically our work has worked with nonprofits, for-profit businesses, and in some ways government locally. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Too bad I don't have a nonprofit. Would love to work with you guys.
We would love to work with you.
Well, I'm sure we could figure something out, Irma.
Yeah.
We could figure something out. Just a reminder, I put Brandon's contact information in the chat if you do want to connect about a sponsored program or a partnership. And if you have general questions about research or Staley School graduate opportunities or the LeadComm doctoral program, you're welcome to reach out to me as well, or really any of our presenters here. And I also wanted to put, Tomasz, I'm sorry, I didn't put the link to third floor research in there. And I, of course, don't have it up, but I don't know if you could add that to the chat real quick in case folks want to check that out as well. Sorry, I didn't do that. But thank you all so much for being here, and we look forward to more opportunities to share and work with you all.